Thank you everyone for joining us today to the Game Development Fundamentals with Todd Albert with Boca Code. My name is Monica Rojas. I'm the Member Engagement Specialist at Palm Beach Tech. Just a little bit about us. We are a tech nonprofit based in Palm Beach County, and we recently expanded to South Florida Tech, so we'll be announcing that later this month. And our goal and mission is to build South Florida into a tech hub, which includes working with local universities, education, coding schools, companies, and partners that will help us grow our tech talent here. And we also offer different tech talks, podcasts, career and technical workshops like this one. And you could definitely go on palmbeachtech.org to see how you can get involved. And everyone's invited actually to our 5-year anniversary happy hour, July 29th. I'll send out a link for that. And so now I'd actually like to introduce you to Todd Albert, lead instructor and founder of Boca Code. Thanks for joining us today, Todd. You can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, good morning. So I'm Todd. I worked as a college professor for the first half of my career and then shifted back to tech. I was coding since I was a little kid and, spent a lot of time in the tech community here, always been a member of Palm Beach Tech and soon to be South Florida Tech since the very beginning. It's an incredible community, love being a part of it. And one of the things I found in my career was I was always needing to hire talent. And down in Miami, they've got great schools there that really, train a lot of talent, but the talent doesn't always want to move up to Palm Beach where all the where we have a lot of jobs. So it's been difficult to get talent here. And that's what I hear from all the companies. So I took my academic background and my coding background, put it together and started Boca Code, which is brand new. And, we're here to help serve the community, train new tech talent, and help out local companies. And I guess I'll jump right in and I'm going to share my screen if it lets me. Yes. And let's get going. So today I wanted to talk about fundamentals of game development. And, like I said, I'm Todd Albert, founder and lead instructor at Boca Code. Here's my email, todd@bocacode.com. Please feel free to reach out anytime. I love, I love helping people out in the community. I could look at your resume, do whatever. I really, just want to help people, help companies, and help members. Like Palm Beach Tech. So I want to thank Palm Beach Tech for sponsoring this event today. And let's jump in and get right to it. So something I wanted to look at today is why do you want to study or learn game development? And this is from Forbes. They said that they predicted that global spending on augmented and virtual reality is forecast to increase 78.5% in this year. Now, of course, this prediction came out prior to the whole COVID and, work from home and everything. So, maybe this might change, but with all of us working from home, learning from home, trying to sell our products from home, the idea of being able to put an experience into our users' hands, like let you see the product that we're selling in your living room, let you do something to expand, have a better experience. Like for educators, for example, they're trying to figure out, how do I engage my students when I have to, teach, they're at home, they're distracted, their brothers and sisters are running around. How do I engage with them in a way that, I would be doing in a classroom or maybe differently? And so a lot of instructors now are looking to these technologies, augmented and virtual reality, gamification. How do I engage more with my audience, right? That's really the key here. So, a lot of people get, they're like, oh, I love playing video games. I want to learn how to build them, and that's fine. You're a perfect audience as well. But there's, I want to point out also that game development has these incredibly valuable skills that are applicable to many projects, not just specifically to games. And just to give you, a little bit of background on this. a few years ago, I used to work at I used to be an owner of Nebular, which is a local development agency, and one of my partners at Nebular and I, this was several years ago when everyone was trying to be a hipster, right? And I had just come back from Brooklyn, and it was ridiculous, the hipsters there. Now, I myself am like a little bit of a hipster from time to time, but this was like over the top. So we created this funny game called Hipster Hurl that was like really just making fun of hipsters. We put it together in like 2 days, and it was really just kind of a joke. We used, I put together the graphics. We used an engine that we had already built for another client, and just threw this game out there. And it really, we probably got 25 downloads on the game. It's not, this isn't the story. But my sales guy had that game installed on his iPad when he was at a conference, and he met up with one of his friends who was now working for the largest advertising agency in the world. And he said, "Hey, do you guys do games?" And he's like, "Yeah, look, we just did this game in like 2 days." And he showed him this, silly hipster arcade game. And so he's like, "I have a client that needs a game." And that client was Ally Bank. Ally Bank, that if you don't know Ally Bank, they probably own your car. They do like almost all the automobile financing. It used to be called GMAC Finance. So it's a big bank. So they were in a few weeks going to have a booth at the National Auto Dealers Association, this huge conference. All the auto dealers in the US go to this conference. And the iPad Pro had just come out, the very first iPad Pro, and they wanted to have a wall of iPad Pros where people could come up and play a game to learn about Ally instead of seeing slides like, boring crap like I'm showing you right now that I'm thinking I should do this in game format, right? And so we actually teamed up with Marvel. Yes, the Marvel you're thinking of, to make characters for this game. And in 20 days, my partner and I created a 3D world that one of my friends said was like SimCity meets Grand Theft Auto in 20 days. It was a 6-figure project for us. And I'll talk a little bit about that throughout this talk to, tell you some of the things that went wrong and right with that. But really cool to be able to work on this project. And so when I say valuable, this was 2 of us and, and my sales guy, just the 3 of us. It was a 6-figure project for us that in 20 days. So we basically earned what for a lot of people would be an annual salary in just a matter of 3 weeks. We then, went on to do a bunch of VR and AR and other games, including we did a cool AR app for 8 o'clock coffee. Back before everyone had the like Snapchat like filters, we created these augmented reality experiences where you could, you click and you're suddenly in a car drinking a cup of coffee with sunglasses on, and you click and you're in bed with a mask on and with a cup of tea next to you, kind of thing. Really cool. And then we did virtual reality for Fiat, and we did a cool 3D game for product demo for Magna. So this, and the list goes on and on. We became known as the only the only development agency in the southeastern United States that was doing AR and VR at the time. So clients were coming to us. We didn't even have to go out and get clients. So these are really valuable skills. Build mobile apps, gamify apps for clients, experiential marketing, like what a lot of this stuff was, and product demos like Magna. Really useful in education and healthcare. So very, very valuable skill set. Oh, and it's also ridiculously fun. Making games is so much more fun. In fact, people are often shocked. I'm not much of a game player. I'm very particular about the games that I play, as you'll hear a little bit about. But making games is so fun, and then seeing people play your games is really something unique. By the way, Deborah said that my connection's bad. Is anybody else seeing that, or is that maybe on her side?
It's good.
I hear you perfectly. Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, Deborah, it's you. So I'm just gonna, a lot of times I give these talks and at the end I say, if you want to learn more, come to Boca Code and join our class. I'm shamelessly promoting right now. We have a class coming up August 10th through 14th. So this is what you're going to hear today is a 1 hour or like 45-minute talk on some of the fundamentals of game dev, but we go in depth into all of these aspects in a 1 week 40-hour course where you're going to be making games every day. You're going to learn VR, you're going to learn how to build mobile games, all of that. In fact, you're going to learn to build games and apps to captivate audiences across all major augmented reality, virtual reality, mobile, desktop, console, web, and TV platforms. So go check it out, bocacode.com. If you're interested, sign up. This class is actually filling up, so sign up quick. Oh, whoops, I had two versions of the slide. There we go. August 10th to 14th, bocacode.com. And when I say, all the major platforms, these are the ones I'm talking about, okay? Every VR platform, every AR platform, every game platform, mobile and everything. There's, so the sky's the limit, even TVs, right? All right, so let's jump into it now. What goes into developing a game? There's a lot, right? And a lot of times I speak to people who are like, I want to be a game developer. And I ask, what aspect of game development do you want to get into? Because very few of us do everything start to finish. Some of us solopreneurs, we just build our own games and do it from start to finish. But there's a lot of different aspects, and just some of them we're going to go into more in the class. But just to keep things short, I'm going to go through each one of these in a little more depth throughout the talk. But there's the story of the game, designing the levels, gathering the assets that you use in the game and the artwork, the music and the sound effects, the user interface or UI, or sometimes called the heads up display, like you get like in the Tony Stark mask in Iron Man. There's game behaviors, there's testing of the game, which may be surprising when I get into for some of you what's involved in that. And then finally, we talk about marketing and deployment. So let's jump into story. Right? So not every game really has a story. The old Pong, there wasn't much of a story to that, right? But the good games, the games that we remember and that we really touch our hearts, always had a story. I mean, even Super Mario Brothers, right? You were a plumber and you had to go rescue the princess from this evil, it was like half dragon, half turtle thing, and then we kept trying, but no, the princess was in another castle. So to create an engaging story, that's for some people, that's part of the game. For some people, they're like, I don't care what the story is. But I want to describe this really incredible, when I was researching this, and I used Donald Miller's 7 story elements, and this guy is brilliant. He spent years analyzing stories and figured out what does it take to create a really good story, a really engaging story. So if you think about like some of the biggest movies or most popular books, the most incredible stories you've ever been engaged with, which for our crew here, we're mostly nerds, so I think of Star Wars, right? That first Star Wars movie, right, where you have a hero, in that case Luke Skywalker, right? And the hero has a problem, right? He's got these pull factors of his family wants him to stay and work on the farm, but he also has these push factors where there's a rebellion going on against the Empire, and he wants to go join that. He wants to fly. He's feeling this pull. And, then suddenly there's the voice of this princess who's saying, help me, right? So then he meets a guide, right? He meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the guide gives him a plan. You're going to learn the Force and you're going to go rescue the princess. And of course, the guide knows a lot more about the story than Luke does. And so in a good story, you have a hero. The hero has a problem. The hero meets a guide. The guide gives them a plan and then calls them to action. Let's go learn the Force and rescue the princess. And there always has to be, for a good story and for a good game, you have to have the possibility of failure. you have to let your characters die or fail to solve the puzzle or whatever it is. But there also has to be an ending where, where there's success. Good games usually have an ending. And, of course, there's exceptions to all of these rules. You have the endless runners, right? Where you just try and get as far as you can. So not every game has all of these elements. Not every story has all these elements, but good stories will have all 7 of these. And please, if you have any questions as we go, drop them in the chat. Come off mute, interrupt me if you want. All right, so the second element, level design. So I take the what makes a good level design, I've cobbled it together based on Dieter Rams' principles of what makes good design in general. So Dieter Rams, a famous designer. And so this is like a take on his design principles as they apply to designing levels for a game. So number 1 should be fun. Like that should be first and foremost. If your game's not fun, come on, what's the point? Your game should, the levels should also convey a story, but do so without words. So I have this picture here, and you look at this, and already okay, this is a city, and maybe there's construction going on, right? So there's a little bit of a story just being conveyed in this single photo, right? And I'm looking at this, and as a character in this game, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to need to jump on that crane or do something in order to, get where I'm going. You should also give the player a clear goal without giving them a clear solution. So, in Super Mario Brothers, you have to go to the end of the level to get to the castle, but there's different paths you can take, and sometimes you fall, and sometimes you can, get eaten. Sometimes you take the high road, the low road, whatever. Maybe in this story here, you have to get to the other side of the city, and you have to find the truck with the big red X on it or something. And I don't know how I'm going to get across this city. Am I going to go across rooftops? Am I going to drop down to the ground level and run on the streets or find a car? I don't know, but I know where I'm heading. So you have a clear goal, but not a clear solution. And along the way, you should learn new skills. Maybe I learned to jump and hang for something or pull myself up. So I learned these like parkour techniques. And now I'm seeing, ooh, I could run along and parkour from rooftop to rooftop. And then I use those skills, and I keep learning new skills that as the levels progress, I need more and more and more of those skills. And there should be surprises. There should be changes, things that happen, things that pop up. Each level should bring on new surprises and new changes. And your level, if it's well designed, will empower the player. A good design, you give the player choices, and these choices can have consequences and benefits. And some of those can be long-term and some of those can be short-term. So maybe there's a short-term consequence that has long-term benefits, right? Like, oh, if I, drink this potion now, it reduces my health, but then I'm going to gain strength long-term. I don't, So one of the ways that games do this is they'll have like side missions, right? Side quests. And those side quests, they're dangerous and they take you off of the main mission of the game, but maybe they have long-term benefits where you gain experience and you gain, more money, gold, equipment, weapons, whatever. Also allowing the player to control the difficulty somewhat is also a really good thing to design into your levels. And some games do this by just having like where you can select 3 difficulty levels right at the beginning, right? Usually it's like easy, medium, hard. Now some games are adding a 3rd level called 2020, right? Where, it's just crazy. But also having like these side missions, like one of the games that actually really engaged me is a game called Dead Island. It's an incredible game. It's an older game, but really good game. And they have side missions and they tell you the difficulty of those side missions. So now you could choose, do I want to do that difficult mission here? I know what the reward is going to be. I know how it's going to affect me long term. But I also know what perils lie ahead. So you really are you're empowering the player with the ability to control the difficulty. So there's two more of these. One is efficiency. So Dieter Ram says design should be efficient. And the way I think of this in terms of level design, like with Dead Island, they have this huge, beautiful island. And sometimes when you're at the top of the building, you look out and you could see all ends of the island at far off places. But then as you progress, you get to those places. So they're not just there just for design, but they end up becoming part of the game itself. And that is more efficient when you're using the entire level. And then finally, a good level design should create emotion. Different levels, they might make you feel relieved or happy or scared or terrified or a sense of urgency, right? And we can do that with other aspects of the game too that we'll get to. Let's jump onto assets. So assets is, the first time I really understood the importance of having the right assets for your game was when I did the game for Ally. And we got to work with this incredible 3D designer. He's the kind of 3D designer that, when you watch commercials and you see this like car coming in and spinning around and you're like, is that real or did they animate that? Is that a computer animation? When you have that thought, is that a computer animation? This is one of those guys that does those animations. And so incredibly talented 3D designer. And he was designing assets for our game. He did all the cutscenes for us. But he gave us these assets that were like these beautiful, detailed models with millions of polygons that make up the model. So every model, 3D model, is made up of polygons. And in this particular this is just one I downloaded off the web. And this particular scene here, there's 28 million polygons in this scene here. That's a lot. That is the kind of asset that you send off to a rendering farm and you get your animation back at the end of the week and see if it looks good. That doesn't work in a game. In a game, we need much lower poly counts, having less polygons that make up the model. So at the top here, I'm trying to show the detail of the model, and in the bottom, some of the outlines that you could see. This is far fewer polygons, maybe 2,000 polygons here, not 28 million. And there's ways that you can actually get the level of detail from a high polygon model like this into a low polygon model like this that's ready for a game, ready for VR. VR is one of the hardest things to render for because you're rendering an entire scene twice, once for each eye. So you have this whole scene that you're rendering and you're rendering it 2 times and you have to do it super fast. You have to do it at least 60 times a second for it to look good. And the person can jerk their head around and you're having to change the scene in real time for them. So this can take a lot of computing power, but there are tricks of taking a scene and using very few polygons and still getting a great level of detail. So let's go into that. First of all, when we get a model, so here I'm just using a model of a sphere. Models can actually have multiple levels of detail, which we call LODs, LODs. So on the left, we've got a high LOD model. It's 6,000 polygons to make up this circle. And on the right, we have a low level of detail, 750 polygons. So it's much less expensive in terms of computational power to render that low level of detail model. So in the case of VR, for example, if something's up close in my face, I want to render it at high detail. So I'm looking at it right here and I see all the detail. But if something's far off, I can use, as it gets further and further away from the player or the camera, you can use less and less and less level of detail. So the far off objects are being rendered in low detail and the closer objects are being rendered in high detail. And then how do we add detail to an object? So we use various techniques called bump maps or normal maps and displacement maps. So here, if you look at the three spheres, the one on the left is the base. So it's just a regular sphere. Sorry, it's a little jagged. It's just how I cut the images. And it's got, some texture on it, some, greens, browns, and tans. Then you take that same model and you apply what's called a bump map, which just tells it where to cast shadows and light areas. And so it creates this artificial texture to it. It looks textured. It looks like if you were to rub that, it would be rough now, not smooth, like the one on the left. But really, it's still a smooth sphere. It hasn't changed the shape of the sphere. It's just artificially casting shadows as if there was a texture. And this is really good to use for things like walls, where you want to have texture on the wall. Then there's what's called a displacement map, where it's very similar to a bump map. It's just a two-dimensional map that gets wrapped over the surface, but this actually raises and lowers the surface. So it's a very simple, low computational way to actually create texture, real texture, on a surface. Okay, now we get into some more of the art, right? Style. You want to make sure you have a consistent style. I see people oftentimes when they start with game dev, they're like, ooh, I love the 8-bit style and I love cartoon and I also want realism and they start combining these things and they look terrible together, right? So you got to pick a genre, pick a lane and stay in that lane. Unless your game is about that. It's like jarring, or all of a sudden you turn into a cartoon or something like that. But for the most part, pick assets that match, right? Your buildings should have a similar style to your characters, your vehicles, your sky, whatever. We have textures, and this is always a jarring image for most people. But what happens is when you take something like even just like a sphere, and this is, what if people who've studied maps know about this, right? You take a map of the world, right? Like I have behind me. It's supposed to be, an oblate spheroid, or, the globe, right? But when you try and stretch that out onto a flat surface, like we're doing here, we're taking a photo, a person's head and stretching it flat, you get distortion and it looks weird. But what's fun in games is you have these texture maps and you can literally just like open them up in Photoshop and, give the guy more freckles, or, clear up his pores, or change his eyes to purple, or do whatever you want, and then you'll see that reflected in the game. There's also lighting. There's 6 different types of lighting that we use in a game: spotlights, point lights, directional, which kind of mimics the sun, area lights, volumetric lights, and then something called ambient light, which, think about this. If you go outside with I was going to say a newspaper, but people don't even know what a newspaper is anymore. Let's say you go outside with a book and you stand in the shade, you can still read the book, right? It's not like the shadows are completely black, right? Because there's ambient light, there's light that's getting scattered and bouncing off of things. And so you could still, even within the shadows, you still have some light, right? You can still read outside when it's, when the sun is out. So the ambient light is actually one of the most important things to make a game look real. So when I worked on that Ally project, I told you I had 20 days. I had dedicated the last 3 days to adding lighting and working on the lighting. 3 days, the last 3 days of the project were to get the lighting looking good. The problem is the guy I was working for on day 4 was like, I want to see how it looks. So I showed it to him without ambient lighting, everything looks very flat. Everything looks very fake. And that wasn't the look he wanted. So I had to move those last 3 days up and work on the lighting first, which is not good practice, but it's just what the client needed to not freak out. There's also shaders. And so far, every single thing I've talked about, you don't need to be a programmer to do. Everything can all be assembled. Everything so far, you don't have to have written a line of code to do. And even with shaders, you can use other people's shaders. But if you want to write your own shaders, these actually are written in code. These have functions. And what they do is they control how light bounces off of or interacts with a surface or a volume. And there's different types of shaders, but the best way to describe this is, I love this photo that my son brought to my attention. This is, the top here is Minecraft, if you guys are familiar, which is this very flat, Lego-like, world that you can play with and build and construct things. And somebody wrote shaders for this very flat world. And this is down below is what this looks like after shaders are applied, right? You get reflections and rippling on the water, you get scattering of light, suddenly it goes from looking very flat to looking a lot more real. So that's the role of shaders. And as a game developer, you could spend your whole life just focused on writing shaders, and that's it. One of my favorite aspects, I'm going to start speeding up because I realize I'm running really low on time and have I just need to speed up a little bit. But one of my favorite aspects of game development are the visual effects, which we use particle effects to do. This is super fun. I spend a good, try not to spend an entire day on this when I do my 1 week course, because we could really go down the rabbit hole with this, but particle effects are super fun. There's animation. So in this case, it's bipedal, like two-legged and walking. And you take a character and you can apply like a skeleton to it, which is called rigging. And then you can apply an animation. And we do animations so differently now. I've been working on game dev. I've been building games now for about 30 years. And the way we did animation 30 years ago is so different than how we do it today. We create animations now, and we can basically just drag an animation onto a character once it's rigged like this, once we give it this artificial bones and joints, and immediately apply that animation to this character as if we animated this character. And it's really cool because you can create an animation or even use a pre-built walking or fighting or jumping or whatever animation, and you can apply that same animation to all of your humanoid-like characters, and they all do that same exact motion, but because they're different shapes, they're different sizes, they're different, they might be short and stumpy or big and tall, it looks so different, but it's the same exact animation being applied. And it's really cool how far we've come with that. Cameras, they're one of the most important parts of the game. This is what the player sees. So in 3D game development, you're creating this whole 3D world, but the player is looking at it just through this camera, which, if it's a case of like a first-person game where you're actually the character running through the game, the camera sits basically where your head would be. So really important to get the cameras right. One of the most important aspects of cameras is what's called clipping. And if for those of you who've played games before, like if you walk too close to a wall, sometimes the wall like disappears. That's clipping. Or sometimes like you're seeing trees appear as you're walking and you're like, why was that tree not there before? This is clipping. And when you see that, it's either because your system can't handle the game, but probably it's because the game designers didn't handle this properly. So when you have a camera, and where this comes to a point here on the bottom left, that's where the camera is. That's where the person's eye is. If you imagine that's your eye there, and then this pyramid shape that's going out is your field of view. That's what you're seeing. And you have a clipping plane that's both near you and far from you. The near you says anything closer than this, don't render. And the far one, it says anything further than that, don't render. So the game is only rendering, it's only drawing the objects that are between the near and the far clipping plane. So you want to put that near plane as close to the person's eyes as you can without, having weird effects. And you want that far plane out far enough that you can see everything that you want to see, right? So if you're in a dungeon, how far down the corridor can you see when you're looking down a long corridor? At some point, the light just fades out and you can't see any further. That's how far you can put that far clipping plane, and everything past that, the computer doesn't have to worry about drawing or rendering. Well, if you take that same camera and you move it outside, and now there's much more light and there's mountains off in the distance and trees, if you can only see this far, you're not going to see the mountains. They're not going to appear. So you have to adjust this when you move from inside to outside and things like that. Okay, moving along. Music and sound, very important for a game. There's 5 different sound families. There's dialogue, actual spoken dialogue. There's music, like background music, sound effects, explosions, gunshots. There's also something called Foley effects, which you don't have in like Super Mario Brothers. There you just have the music and the sound effects. But Foley effects are like actual, like the footsteps, the crunching on the gravel, things like that. The rustling of the leaves when you walk through a bush. And then there's also ambient sound, right? If you're in a city, it's maybe traffic and horns honking in the distance and generators running, whatever. In the woods, it's maybe birds chirping and wind rustling through the trees. So there's the ambient sound. And these all work together for the purposes of telling a story, of focusing the user's attention, defining the space, right? Is this sound very up close and you're in a very small space? Or is it deep and echoey and the space is large? It can set the mood, right? Like emphasizing intensity of action or the calmness. And it can really set the pace, right? Really rapid music, it gets your heart racing and you feel this sense of urgency, and then the music calms down and you're like, whew, I can slow down. And it can help smooth transitions. So all in all, sound is made to make the experience a lot more immersive, especially with technology like virtual reality. This becomes extremely important. Then we get into the UI, or some people call it the heads-up display, right? Like Iron Man. And good UI should give relevant information that's clear and obvious in a simple and out of the way with no needless complexity. And I found this picture, I don't even know what game this is from, but as an example of a UI, they have an icon of your car in the bottom left, and it shows like levels of damage and everything. And, I guess there's like a tachometer, a speedometer on the right. But what I loved about this was not either of those. What I loved about this is that the car, your character here, your car, that's front and center that you're looking at, it's showing you the damage right there on the car. Like I said, I don't even know what game this is. It's unimportant to me, but I want to show you that some of the information can be conveyed right there, right on the player, if you will. So you could see what parts of the car are damaged just by looking at the car. That to me is good UI. There are a ton of different types of UI. There's ring menus, which are becoming really popular. Life meters, which we've always had, since the very beginnings of gaming. Level maps, there futuristic overlays like the Iron Man, type mask. You can sometimes have gadgets where you have to like look down at your wrist to interact, or lift something up and mess with it. Physical limitations like stamina sometimes pops up with scrolling text on the screen. In VR, a lot of times we use these selection auras where there's areas of glowing where you can walk into or look at to trigger something. And then finally, there's also sometimes you get racing lines that tell you like the best path to take, object labels that, maybe when you look at an object, it tells you about it. Field of view color filters. So sometimes your entire screen will like flash a color to give you a signal like you're taking damage or you're getting thirsty or whatever the case may be. And then also something called grime, which is like what you saw on the car there, which indicates damage or degradation. Sometimes it's on the whole screen. Your view gets grimier and grimier as you take damage. All right, last couple of sections here. Behavior. How does the game behave? This is a big topic. We spend a lot of time, can spend a lot of time on this. Some of this can be, how does the game behave when you interact with it? Do you have enemies coming at you, or are they going to chase you, or are they just there for you to kill? All kinds of things, including the physics of the game, right? Are you going to be floating in space? Are you flying? Or, is there gravity? And so in those terms, we have rigid body dynamics, which are, actual based on physics, soft body physics, particle simulations. And what I like is this flow chart here, that for every frame, remember I said for VR, you need at least 60 frames a second. For every frame, every object in the game that's in view, it calculates all of these things between each frame. It takes an object, you have an object in the game, it applies any forces that need to be applied to it. It then updates the position and the velocity of that object. It detects if that object is now colliding with something. It solves any constraints that you have on it, like it can't go through the ground or something like that. And then it displays the results. And it does all those calculations on every object in view for every single frame of the game. So how does it detect collisions, which are really important in games? Well, most of your important game objects will have what are called colliders. And these can be simple, primitive objects like just a cube. Oftentimes, on your hands, you'll put on a character's hands, you'll put a cube so you can detect punches, feet. For the head, you might use a sphere. Here in this guy on the left, you can see we just use a capsule to estimate his entire body. And then we can also use mesh colliders like you see on the right. These are computationally much more expensive. So we try not to use them, and we will, unless it's really necessary, we try and simulate those with more primitive objects that are simpler to, computationally, like cubes, spheres, and capsules. And then there's the AI side of the game, or the actual player behavior. And usually this is used to take your non-player characters, like your enemies or your friends in the game, and make them seem intelligent, right? Give them some simulated intelligence. So sometimes that's used to determine where they can walk. Like, let's say you have a cow in the game and there's a wall. Can the cow walk up the wall? Right? So, or no, it has to stay on level ground, or it can only walk up slopes of a certain height, and it can only step up and down a certain amount. So these are things that go into determining where a character can, a non-player character can move about in your game. And then what decisions they make, which we usually use some kind of decision tree. And this is kind of on the left here. This is a very simple version of a decision tree. So you have, this character that's wandering, right? And then if he sights the player, he's going to attack. He's going to attack her. And then while the enemy is attacking, if she attacks back, then he evades. He runs away. And if he's damaged, he goes and he finds aid. He tries to go heal himself. And once he's healed, he starts wandering again. If he runs away and then the player stops attacking him, he can start attacking her again, right? And then if the player disappears, if she evades, then he goes back to wandering. So it's a real simple flowchart decision tree right here. And I say simple, you might look at that and be like, that's simple. These can get increasingly complex. In fact, in a game, in a typical game, about up to 50% of the budget for a game just goes into this, the AI and this decision making. There's other behaviors like, do we have some kind of reward system, gamification? Are you going to have enemies, like I said, that attack or that you can attack? Are we going to have skill trees where you can build up skills in the game? Do you have to manage resources and so on? So there's a lot of different behaviors to think about. Okay, so we're finishing up, just a couple more slides here. Testing. I love talking about this because I meet people all the time that are like, oh, I want to be a video game tester, right? And what they imagine is sitting around in their underwear playing video games all day, right? That's their job. They're like, yes, that's what I want to do for a living. Loser. But there's all different types of testing and so much more goes into that. So that type of testing is usually what's called QC, right? Quality control. But quality control, it's not just about playing the video game. It's about trying to break the game. It's about finding and documenting bugs in the game. So you're not just playing, you're playing and trying to figure out a way to break the game. And then when you break it, you have to be able to go back and do it again and document every step you took to go through and break the game. So it's a lot about writing it up and being able to repeat things and being able to find those bugs again and send those reports back to the developers. You can test things like the design of the game. Does it follow good game theory? What's the experience like? This is super important for VR. We had, after we built the game for Ally, they came back to us and they're like, we want you to build version 2 and it's all VR. And they told us exactly what it was going to be like. And we said, no, that's bad. They're like, we want to see it. So we spent an entire day developing this VR version of the game for them. And by 11 a.m. that day, I was throwing up. I was so sick from motion sickness because of the VR. And so my partner had to put on the VR headset. And by, within a couple hours, he was sick. And we had to record a video of this. So finally, he put the headset on, eyes closed. He was like, okay, just tell me what to do. And so I had the video of him. And I'm like, so now James is going to look up and he just goes like this. And it shows what he sees on the screen. We were both so sick. And this is so important that to get this right, especially with VR. Monica asked, how long does testing take? It really depends on the game and the complexity of the game. But it could take a year for a complex like AAA level game. You could set up automated tests which could speed that up. So you could program computers to basically simulate playment of the game and see where things break. You have to test performance, security. Can people hack the game? Is it compliant, right? Does it follow rules and things like that? Localization, I always think about like, translating my game into Hebrew for Israel, and suddenly, all the text reads right to left in Hebrew. So do the labels now go off the screen because they're going the wrong way or something like that? Compatibility with like different systems, does it work with, you build an iPhone game, does it work with old versions of iOS on old phones, things like that. And then things like soak and load testing, where you just try and burn in the game, testing multiplayer functionality and so forth. So I'm running out of time, so let me just finish up. This is the last part. Marketing. Now you've built this game, you've tested it, you've got this incredible game, and you got to get it out there, right? So how do you market? How do you deploy? So you can do all kinds of things, like hold a competition, see who can get the highest score, seed it out to like influencers on social media, try and get them to posts about your game, use streaming services, get it out through word of mouth, host gaming events, do behind the scenes videos. These are really popular. People love these, like videos of what it took to make the game, to test the game and so forth. Try and get celebrities to play or endorse your game. And basically, ultimately, you're trying to get on the front page of the internet where gamers live, which is Reddit. So that's the quick and dirty of game fundamentals. Please check us out at bocacode.com. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and jump back in so we can have some discussion and answer any questions. But thank you again, and please check us out. We're brand new, bocacode.com.
Thanks,
any questions?
Todd. Yeah, I actually have a question. I have like two.
Awesome. Great.
So you referenced the 7 elements that storytelling should include. What would you say is the most important one?
Oh, it really depends. That book, actually, Donald Miller, he wrote that for marketing. Actually, he was saying that good marketing needs to tell a story, and the whole thing with that from a brand perspective, right? So Palm Beach Tech, you're trying to get the word out there and tell people. The wrong way to tell people that Palm Beach Tech is awesome is to say, hey, we're Palm Beach Tech and we can help you, right? That's putting yourself as the hero, right? What you want to do is you want to make them the hero, right? And you want to be the guide. You want to say, listen, your company can benefit. We can take your company into this, this whole regional marketplace, right? We want your imagine yourself, your company in this new situation, that, being able to put the person as the hero, I think is the most important. You want to put, I think that's the most important part, is to try and connect your game player with the hero of yours, as the hero of your story, not making the game the hero, not being like, our game is so cool, we did such a great job, but you're going to have fun playing this game, you're going to love playing it. I think that's the key.
Okay. No, thanks for that. That really helped. And when you make the characters, do you guys usually interview people that would most likely play your game, or do you guys internally figure that out? Like, how would that work, and how would a developer really kind of make the impact in their company?
Yeah, so that really depends on the project, the size of the project, right? So for like the Ally game, for example, we knew who the customers were going to be ahead of time, and we didn't have time to do interviews and go out. We were on a super tight time schedule, so we weren't going to change development based on interviews, even if we had the time to do them. But for a larger project, usually the way I usually describe user experience, right? A person in a user UX role, part of their job is to go out and talk to the game players, right? And figure out how they want to interact with the game, how they best would see this game working, and then coming back and kind of crafting and architecting the game based on the feedback that they've gotten. Then the developers take that and go from there, right?
Right. And normally, I mean, I know you said testing might take like a year. How long would it take just to make a simple game? Like, okay, not simple, but like, how long do you think Fortnite took to play, like to make?
Well, so those are multiple different questions there, right? How long
Yeah.
does it take to make a simple game? In the game dev course, we're going to be making, it's a 40-hour course, and we're probably going to make, over the course of the week, 6 games in 40 hours, right? So these are going to be quick, rapid prototype type games that, come together very quickly. And maybe by the end of the week, you'll have one that's really, the quality where you really want to show it off and put it on your phone and walk around playing it. But very simple games, if you know what you're doing, you can quickly prototype a simple game in an hour. I've demoed this in some of my videos, where we start from scratch, create a game, a full working game in an hour, right? Now, you're not doing user experience, you're not doing testing, you're not interviewing people, you're not doing anything, crazy character animation. But something simple like a marble race game, without a lot of crazy level design, can be prototyped very, very quickly. Some games take years. The sequel to Dead Island, they've been working on it for years, and they keep saying it's coming out in December. Every year they move which December, but a typical game will take, for the big companies that have a lot of people working on it, it's typically roughly, say, a year, right? But they start testing from the beginning. They put things together, they start testing, they add, and they continue. So the testing is continual. It's not that they spend 9 months building the game and then the last 3 months testing. Testing is woven throughout. And then, towards the end, when they're doing the final testing, the marketing team is also working on, putting together trailers and marketing and seeding it out. Deborah asked, is there a way to make it work for someone like me who does not see in 3D? So Deborah, there's, games don't have to be 3D. Some of the best games that, most people's favorite game ever was like Super Mario Brothers. It's a classic, right? And that was a 2-dimensional game. So we do a lot of 2D games, a lot of 2D game development, platform game development. It's not all about 3D. Yeah, Pac-Man, right? That's another super classic game. Those were all 2D games. And yeah, some people struggle with the 3D. in VR, you're kind of, you're forced to create 3D games for VR and AR. But for just creating a fun playable game, you don't need the 3D to do that. Or you can create games where that are called like 2.5D, where there's you're only playing along one plane, but there's some depth to it. So we look at that as well. So thanks for everybody's questions. Any
does
others?
anyone else have any more questions? Tell them just to drop it in the chat, or just go ahead and unmute yourself too. But
Jen, sorry for spoiling your, you're blowing your concept of what game testing is like. But that's a lot of people think that they think, game testers just sit around in their, in their underwear with, big bowl of Cheetos and some Mountain Dew playing video games all day. And it's a lot, there's a lot of that, but it's a lot more of a Q&A or QA QC type position.
Yeah, and it, like, for me, I didn't even realize that a lot of it is like customer discovery. You have to ask all the right questions and then like rechange little details. And you even mentioned the freckles, adding freckles to a character. I'm like, what? Like, you didn't even think of that. Oh, Michael has a question. In terms of finding employment, what channels would you recommend for game development?
Yeah, great question, Michael. And for some people, that's that's the number one question. It really depends on what you're trying to get into and what you're trying to do. But one of the things I tried to point out, and I know I was talking very quickly, I wanted to cover a lot in a short amount of time. So I apologize if I glanced over things, but like I mentioned, where we just having demos, having games that you've actually developed, right? If you want to become a game developer, and like I hopefully what you guys glean from this is being a game developer is not a position. There's all different things. You can be a 3D designer, you can be a sound engineer, you can be an animator, you can be, you can just work on character creation. There's so many different aspects of it, behavior engines. So focus on your niche, right? Get really good at one niche of it, and then have demos create a portfolio around that, and put your portfolio online and start seeding it out on LinkedIn and Indeed and all the normal channels. But once you get good, people should hopefully come to you. So yeah, and Monica just also posted that, it's Palm Beach Tech's 5-year anniversary in 2 weeks. So, everybody's invited to the happy hour on the 29th, which Boca Code is going to be one of the sponsors of. We're really excited about that as well.
You're going to be helping us out with games, Todd, for that day. So
what's that?
You're going to be helping out with games.
Yeah, games, exactly. Yeah. So, but coming back, Michael, if, we at Boca Code, we try and also help. One of the ways we're trying to give back to the community is through career services. So I encourage you to come, if you're not already, join our Slack, and I post jobs on there, on average a job or two a day. I post on there. Palm Beach Tech, on their Slack channel, there's a ton of job listings. I don't see a lot of game dev jobs come up on the Palm Beach Tech, but I do have connections outside of the South Florida community. So I try and post a lot of those jobs regularly in the Boca Code Slack. So please come, come join our Slack, reach out, join the community. There's also some really good meetups locally. One that has sponsored some of my events in the past, a really good group called the South Florida Game Developers Association. Let me say that again slower. South Florida Game Developers Association. I think they sometimes just go Florida, FLGDA. And you can find them on Facebook or on Meetup. And Praveen, who's the one who runs that, really good guy, super well connected. And thank you, Monica. And Monica just put that in the chat. The guy who runs it, Prav, is super well connected. He has connections at Unity and Unreal. He's got connections all over. and they actually work together to work on games. So if you want to contribute to the games that they're building as well, it's a good outlet.
All right. Well, it looks like we're all set with questions. Todd, thanks again for joining us. You did an amazing job. Again, we're going to send out a follow-up email. It's todd@bocacode.com if you have any questions. Wait, Todd, when does your what's it called? Your work, not your workshop, your classes
The course.
kick off for?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
our next class is our game dev class,
Okay.
and it's August 10th. So, you know, there's time to register, but that one is super popular. So it will hopefully fill up very quickly. Yeah. So August 10th, just go to, you know, here else. I think Jen slacked the link earlier. Yeah, I'll just, or
Yeah,
I
we'll
say
send out a
Slack,
follow-up
put it in
email
the chat.
too. We'll include that in our
Yeah,
email.
there we go. Awesome. So
All right.
please come check us out. And, you know, if you really want to get into depth, we'll do like actual VR and AR and 2D and 3D games. And, you know, Deborah, if you want to come, you don't have to do the 3D games. You could focus on 2D stuff. You know, we'll do a little 3D, but everybody can kind of have their own projects going and focus on what they want to focus on.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Todd. And I hope everyone has a great and safe weekend. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Nikki.
Bye.
Bye.